prejudice, the stereotypes, the marginalization. I'm an artist. I can't help it. I was born that way. And then to make the whole thing worse, right? So, I'm sort of born with this condition, and I figured, well, so what am I supposed to do about it? So I go and I do what any sort of normal person does. I seek help. I went to an art school, and I trained. They were very helpful. I trained for many, many years, and to learn how to properly be introspective and to communicate my ideas visually, right? To go up into my studio and emote. To understand myself. So with all of that, it's coming back. So with all of that introspection, right? What happens? What happens whenever you're sitting alone at home in a room and you're being introspective? Guilt. So you're consumed by guilt. So now all of a sudden I'm being consumed by guilt for looking at sticks most of my life. So what do I do? So what do you do when you're alone at home? You're sitting in a room and you're consumed by guilt. You go and volunteer. You volunteer in an inner city school, and you help inner city black people learn how to use the arts in a constructive way that relates to their educational prospects, right? Okay? Yeah, so I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was working at something called the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, and I was working with these young people, and I'm trying to figure out how to make the arts, make sense to them somehow, educationally. And I encountered the requisite challenge. There's always the challenge. This is what happens. So there was a young fellow named Charles. So I'll tell you the story now. Along with all the other things that I mentioned earlier, there's sort of two issues. That was the first one. I'm going to start to tell you about the second one. This guy, he would come, he would show up. He made me a little nervous. I'll admit that to you now. In private here, as we're all being very private among 1,000 people in the room. I was a little nervous. So he'd commandeer the office, lay back, put his cap down, turn the lights out. We would leave. We'd leave him in private, so he could have the office to himself. I'd go out and teach a lesson or do something. Week after week, this happened. Then I started to worry that, this was my challenge. This is a problem student that I wasn't getting through to. What am I going to do? I'm the innovative educator, right? I'm coming up with new emotional, educational ways to address these problems, to help students. And now I have a challenge. What am I supposed to do? So I thought, okay, well, I'll confront him. Yeah, okay. I'll confront Charles. I said, so I came to him one day in the office, and I sat down. I pulled up a chair. I got a little business card. I woke, after he woke up, I said, Charles, I said, if you don't mind, this is photography, right? So, one day if you see something that you're interested in photographing anywhere, we can just take the class, we can go out there and we can do some photography. If that's okay with you, So, he says, yeah, okay, fine. Weeks passed, and it happened. To make a long story short, it finally happens. He used the business card, he makes the telephone call, the phone rings, and I'm sort of going out of my mind. I'm very excited. I get all the things together. I had my little kit by the door just in case he would call, right? So I grab the camera and I run out, get in the van, drive over, to wherever he is, and into the inner city, the deepest, darkest parts of the inner city. And I jump out and he's there, and we got in a van and drove around for a couple of hours, and I let him out at the McDonald's and gave him a few dollars. so he could get something to eat. But he called back. He called again. He calls again, and we went through the whole process. This happens a few times. I'm not going to, bore you with the whole thing. Finally, we start to photograph. Okay? So we're making, and things are progressing. Week after week, we're photographing. And, I'm thinking, okay, this is going well. This is going good. I'm getting through to him. I'm getting through to this, this student. And then, I guess, okay, fine. It's the ego, right? The most profound hallucinogen. So it was kind of, I'm the artist. And I'm thinking, okay, so maybe I got too big for my britches or something. And, here we are. We got because I gave him the good stuff. We've got the old-fashioned camera, the tripod, the 4x5, the little thing you throw over your head, and you get under there, and you're focusing on that whole Polaroid 4x5, right, large format, okay? And we're taking these pictures, and I figure, what the heck? If we're out here, we might as well make the images good-looking. We might as well make some beautiful photographs, right? So I says, so he's framing, and he's getting the thing, and he takes another picture, he hands it to me. And I can't stand it. And I says to him, look, I said, Charles, I said, in order to enhance the aesthetic properties of the image, I said, in order to improve our composition, I said, why don't we just move the camera over just slightly to the left and maybe pull back a little. And, I feel that it would really make this image kind of really sing, You just Say what? And I said, well, I said, I'm just talking about composition, right? And he said, what you mean? What do you mean aesthetic? And I said, well, it's to improve the overall aesthetics of the picture, He said, he said, Mr. Lonnie, man, he said, aesthetic, man. He said, you talking about some art thing? Oh, my gosh. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I said, yeah. Yes, Charles. Yes, art. I'm speaking about art. Yes. He said, man, this ain't about no art thing. I said, no? He said, no, man. I said, what is it exactly? I said, hold on a minute. So I run back to the van, and I get their Polaroids. I come back, and I get my little stack of pictures. And I'm going, well, what is this? He said, man, that's where Bobby got beat up, man. I said, what's this one? He said, that's where Kiki got raped. I said, what's this one? He said, that's where Lavelle got shot. He said, man, this ain't got nothing to do with me. He said, look, when people in my community look at these photographs, he said, they will know what the pictures are about. He said, these pictures are for all the people that live here with me. The light went on. It was the epiphany. I mean, for years, I had traveled all over the place, looking for the arts and trying to figure out, all of a sudden, this makes sense, right? These artists make sense. These individuals that are working side by side with the members of their community to produce work that's inspiring, that's sharing, to cultivate these ideas, right? This stuff is beginning to make sense. No, it's not beginning to make sense. It made perfect sense. And then I started to think about all the artists all over the world that are producing artwork like this, right? Okay, so there's a wedding. You paint the house. These are in Ndebele in South Africa. somebody gets married, they paint a house. There's adornment, these self-adornment, and you've seen them in the National Geographic. You've seen all of these people getting all dressed up for whatever occasion that they happen to have. If there's an artist involved, the artists are involved at a fundamental level in the community. They're about the community. These traditional artists. Here's a guy that knows nothing about the arts, right? He doesn't care about the arts. It doesn't even allude. He doesn't want me to mention the word. But here he is, an artist in its most essential and fundamental fashion. And here we have it now. Generation after generation of artists being trained in these art schools. As it is, right? We have communities that have needs, basic needs: food, clothing, housing, education, communication. Okay, so here, you've got a whole bunch of organic problem solvers, these creative problem solvers. And over here, you've got a community that has needs. What the heck? What are you going to do? Right? Okay, because whenever you get these people together communicating these ideas, whenever you get all of these people together fostering understanding, right? Those fears are dispelled. Enlightenment occurs. People begin to share and understand and communicate with one another. This is the role of the arts. This is what I'm talking about. Now, what are you going to do?